जागो पधारो मैं जो गण देवा जागो पधारो मैं जो गण देवा जागो जागो इंसानों के जागने का है ये समय देखना हो न जाए देर आने वाला जो कल होगा आज का ही वो फल होगा देना हमको दखल होगा कूचा कूचा पुकारे
A creative genius and a legendary filmmaker whose celluloid creations on the social inequalities of life left an indelible impression on the minds of cinema lovers. He was one of the pioneers of the new cinema movement in India. The legacy of Sen will forever be an inspiration for future generations of filmmakers who would use the cinematic canvas to portray the political and social realities of life. On May 14th, 1923, an icon was born. Today we are delighted to celebrate Kunal Sen's legacy at the Bengal Club with a rendezvous with his son Kunal Sen and Ina Puri. The Tête-à-tea has been organized to celebrate Sen's life and works and mark his birth centenary. Good conversations are always enjoyable. I am Esha Dattu, Honorary Convener of Northeast India Affairs of Prabha Khaitan Foundation and Ehsaas Women of Kolkata. And I am delighted to welcome you for this rendezvous with Kunal Sen and Ina Puri. Today's event is in association with digital media partners, The Telegraph Online and My Kolkata, and anandabazar.com. The event enjoys the support of Ehsaas Women of Kolkata and the patronage of Shree Cements Limited as their CSR initiative. Before the session begins, allow me to say a few words about the foundation. Prabha Khaitan Foundation, a non-profitable trust based in Kolkata, was established by eminent literati, cultural activist, social worker and feminist, late Dr. Prabha Khaitan, back in the 1980s. The foundation has a wide range of activities and endeavors. Book launches, authors' meets, stimulating panel discussions, and literature festivals for veteran and child authors are platforms to encourage Indian literature and languages. Under the art and culture vertical, the foundation hosts rendezvous with eminent personalities and curates programs that showcase the heritage of Indian dance, song, music, performing arts, and oral storytelling. Integration of music has been an important part of the events and activities organized by the foundation. We are happy to share that 3-time Grammy Award winner Ricky Cage, who is the man behind the signature caller tune of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, has curated 12 amazing musical pieces to score across video invites of events and social media platforms. As you are aware, the song for the month of May is dedicated to the theme of unity in diversity. The foundation enjoys the noble patronage of Shree Cements Limited and the able support of associates, collaborators, and Ehsaas Women of India. It is a pleasure and privilege for me to introduce Kunal Sen and conversationalist Ina Puri. Kunal Sen grew up in Kolkata. In his formative years, he was surrounded by art workers, which included his filmmaker father and his actor mother. In his professional life, he worked as a scientist, a teacher, a textbook author, and for the last quarter of a century, he has been involved with Encyclopedia Britannica. Currently, he is the Global Chief Information Officer for 2 historical and iconic publishers, Encyclopedia Britannica and Merriam-Webster, with a combined lifespan of 450 years. During the last decade, Kunal also turned his hobby into a second profession and creates visual art from his studio in Chicago. He combines his skills in painting and engineering to create art that includes elements of painting, sculpture, and kinetic objects using active electronics. He exhibits regularly around the United States. SAS woman of Gurugram, Ina Puri is the conversationalist for the session. Ina Puri is a writer, biographer, art curator and collector. She is the author of several books, including In Black and White, a biography of Manjeet Bawa, readings series on Manjeet Bawa, Lalit Kala Academy, Faces of Indian Art, iconic artists seen through the lens of Nimai Ghosh, and Journey with 100 Strings on the music and life of Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma. Ina Puri's lens has always remained on the city, and she edited a comprehensive volume on Raj Bhavan. She edited Calcutta, Kolkata by Raghu Rai, and recently on Satyajit Ray by Raghu Rai. She has regularly edited publications for Kolkata's art galleries and has been curating major exhibitions with several institutions and galleries. She produced Meeting Manjeet, a film on Bawa, which won the National Award in 2003. The Portrait of an Artist in the World on Paresh Maiti and Nimai Ghosh is her most recent publication. Ina's 3-decade-long engagement with the arts embraces tribal art and folk theatre to contemporary performing arts, visual arts, and literature. Without further delay, over to you, Ina, and thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Isha. That was very generous of you, reading the whole, or almost the whole biodata for both of us. So when I asked Kunal some months, perhaps even a year ago, that we were on the cusp of this huge centenary year that was coming upon us in 2023 of Mrinal Sen's, whether we should have a dialogue in Calcutta when he was visiting next. Kunal immediately agreed, and that was what set the ball rolling. I spoke to Prabha Khaitan Foundation and they immediately agreed. So I would like to thank Sandeep Bhutoria, Onindita Chatterjee and the entire team of Prabha Khaitan Foundation who have come forward and made sure that everything is in place. What I thought we'd do is I would ask Kunal some questions and then let him speak, because it is for him to speak and remember his father, sometimes with a little irreverence, but that is Kunal for you. Honest, compassionate, but very honest. I think that is the word that describes him above everything else. So, in an interview to Shomik Bandyopadhyay, Kunal Sen said, "I have been made in Calcutta. Calcutta has shaped me, inspired me, frustrated me, has made me cry, made me laugh, made me think, provoked me. My greatest contemporary sensibility that has grown out of my existence in Calcutta has gone into the making of all my films." This was when Reinhard Hoff was making a documentary on Sen, and the two were revisiting the village where he shot Akale Shondhane. My question is, did this intimate association with the city wane over time? Kunal.
Hello. I think he fell in love with the city the moment he came here. When he was 17, he grew up in a very small town in now Bangladesh, East Bengal, in Faridpur. And then he came for his college. And the moment he came, this was in the 40s, early 40s. So his love affair with the city started right then, and that's why, unlike many other people who came from the east to the west, he never had any strong nostalgic feeling about. I mean, of course, he had nostalgia about the place he left, but he never felt displaced or a refugee. His rest of his family came after partition, and they had probably that kind of feeling. But so he considered Calcutta to be the place that made him grow and, as you said, and become who he was.
But did the people change over time?
Probably. I mean, I can see that if you look at his films, his earlier films were very Calcutta-centric, and later on, towards the end, the films had Calcutta as a background, but they were no longer the central character in the film. He was more introspective towards the end, and plus politically there was a little bit of disillusionment that when he was growing up, he and many like others all believed that a major change will come, and they were confident about that change, and that he realized didn't happen and may not happen.
Yeah. Where the oeuvre of his films were concerned, Mrinal Sen's Khandar was a rare departure, as it probed the complicity of filial relationships. Kunal, we just watched this film together at the India Habitat Center. It was a very moving experience. I saw the film last in 1984 or 85, I think. No?
84. Yes.
Yet this was a man who liked to say, I stay away from nostalgia, drawing upon your own lives. Were there moments or moods that became a part of his cinematic narrative?
So I think his position on nostalgia was partly true, partly he wanted to believe that. He was always afraid that nostalgia puts a romantic color on things, and you lose objectivity. So he fought nostalgia. I don't think he was intrinsically non-nostalgic, but he fought it because he thought it's a slippery slope. So when he talked about his past, of course there was nostalgia, but he didn't want to dwell on it. And for Kandahar, to me it's a little bit of nostalgia maybe, but it's more about the interior life and loneliness of one character, of how dreadful loneliness can be.
Which was played by your mother, Geeta Shin.
And Shabana's feature is even more.
As a younger person who was subjected to that kind of loneliness. Ferini said, there is a TV set in our flat. It is like an intruder. When I come home, I sometimes switch it off. I find it disgusting if my films are interrupted by commercials of spaghetti. How did Mrinal Babu cope with the assault of popular culture? What led to the making of the 12 short films for Doordarshan?
So, yes, I mean, he had a lot of almost allergic reaction to TV because the kind of TV which was there, the advertisement, interruption, and the very fact that, let's say I'm watching a film on TV and it's showing a sequence which is dead at night, and suddenly I glance at the watch, the clock sitting on the TV set, and it says it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The illusion immediately breaks, which doesn't happen that easily on a screen, on a movie theater. But at the same time, I think he realized that people can transcend. He preferred to make short films. So when Kabhi Dur Kabhi Paas was done, he made them agree that there will be commercials at the beginning, commercials at the end, not interrupting the film. I don't think in today's environment he could have pulled it off. I mean, he could manage it then.
Which year was this, Kunal?
This was 85, 86, around that time. And and if you look at those films, he chose a very different format. The stories are with very small number of characters. They are all interiors.
Yes.
The shots are very close. So he tried to adopt. I don't know how successful he was, but he tried to adopt to a new medium. And somebody was asking me the other day that how would he have reacted to today's culture of watching a film on a phone screen with a headphone on, in a train. And my personal opinion is we often underestimate the imaginative capacity of good audience, not everyone. When I grew up, most of the European films I have seen, I saw it through Film Society screenings. These are usually non-air conditioned Chorola Memorial. Extremely hot. You're sweating and you are watching a Scandinavian film with snow. And we could transcend that. You could easily transcend that. So I'm sure that a good audience sitting in a crowded train on a phone screen probably can take that leap. Of course, big screen is better.
But Kunal, you've recently been posting these films, and there's been huge appreciation. How did you find them?
Oh, that's a terrible story. So, Doordarshan produced these films, 12 of them, and after about a couple of years, my father needed a copy of it. So he wrote to Doordarshan, and they couldn't find it. And somebody, they never told us exactly why, but somebody who works inside Doordarshan, he said they will never be able to say so, but they taped over those tapes. They needed a tape. So all those tapes were taped over. So when he was making those films, I was already in US, so he sent me very poor quality VHS copies of those films. So I had those. Not all of them, but maybe 80% of them. So one day I thought, okay, why not try to digitize and put it up on the web? I know it's illegal, but since the rights owners, they've lost the film, I don't think they have much of a right to complain. So I put it up, no one complained. And seeing that National Film Archive of India in Pune, they wrote to me saying that, how did you digitize them? And I said, I did it at home in a very unprofessional equipment. He said, yes, we could tell and we can do a much better job. Why don't you send us those tapes? I said, I have no problem, as long as you promise that it will be shown.
Exactly, yes, yes.
And they said, yes, we'll put it up on our own channel and everyone can see. So I FedExed those 2 tapes, and that was 2 years ago, and it's lost in the customs, in Bombay Customs. So this group is fated. They're still trying to recover it, but I don't think they will. There's another custom story. He made a film called Chalchitro, which is not seen here, and even those who have seen it, it's not a generally liked film, but I find it to be one of his most modern films, structurally, very, very modern. That film, when it was finished, before it could be released, it was requested by an international film festival, and they didn't like the quality of the print. So they said, why don't you send us the negative and we will make our own print. Normally in that situation, you are supposed to make a duplicate of the negative called duping. But they didn't have the time or the money, so they sent the original negative. The festival printed 1 copy, sent back that negative. That negative was lost in Calcutta Customs. So there is no copies of that film other than that 1 copy that survived. It was never released and never screened.
But we have a DVD.
Those are probably created out of that 1 print, and they're not that great. Usually the quality is not very good.
Kunal, keeping in step with contemporary times, way back in 1986, Mrinal Sen had said, as one living in a world progressing with the rapid growth of science and technology, I find no reason why I should not take to a new form of artistic expression. And rest assured, I'm not going to be a deserter to the cause of cinema. Tell us about your own work, and if this influenced your father's notions about science and technology in any way. I do know that you always had this relationship where you could talk to each other very freely, maybe even influence.
So we had a long-standing argument between my father and myself. he truly believed in low budget films. He believed the only way a filmmaker can make independent films that are not influenced by the financier is to keep the budget low. Because if you can keep the budget low, even if it is seen by a few scattered audience here and there, and maybe you make one or two sales abroad, you bring back the money. The moment the budget goes up, that becomes impossible. In fact, he used to say something that I cannot fully agree, but he used to say that if I walk into a filmmaker's house, I can tell what kind of films I can expect. That is what he meant, is if there is a lot of affluence in that setting, then I don't expect good films out of that person. That may not be generally true, but so as a result of that, he was against anything that is of high technology, high gloss, Hollywood-style production. So he was immediately resistant to that, and he was resistant to special effects and all those things. And I tried to say that yes, true, that most high technology films are not interesting films, but that doesn't necessarily have to be. But I didn't have too many examples. So I gave an example of 2001 Space Odyssey by Kubrick. I said, you cannot do that film without technology. But a more poignant example was Kurosawa did a series of short films called The Dreams.
Yes,
it's beautiful.
it's very beautiful.
There is a sequence where an artist is painting outdoors in an open space, and he starts seeing these fields of sunflower, and they transform into Van Gogh's painting.
That's right.
And he walks into it. I said, this is he had a dream. He could not have done it otherwise. And his argument was, well, look at who produced that film. It was a George Lucas, Steven Spielberg production. He said, Kurosawa, with his stature, can do whatever he wanted to with such backing. But a normal filmmaker will not be able to pull it off.
Share with us a glimpse of your life at home. Apart from your father, Geeta Sen, your mother, was a gifted actor. And there was also Anup Kumar, who played such a major role in your boyhood years.
Yes, essentially my father figure in my youngest age was my uncle. I used to call him Onu, because my father was completely irresponsible, and he never wanted to take any responsibility of a fatherly responsibility. So I still remember, I think you have read it, one time while playing in a park, I fell down and I hit my chin with on the edge of a step, and there was a huge gash and it started bleeding, and all the older kids in the park, they took me to a local drugstore where they stitched me up, and my shirt was drenched in blood. So I came back home like a hero. And my mother saw it, and she was tremendously panicked to see me in that state. But anyway, I was okay, and I was asked to lay down, and my father was out of town. And I was desperately imagining what will be his reaction. He will come back home, see this, there will be panic, he will ask a lot of questions. And eventually my father did walk in, and he saw that I was lying with a big bandage, and asked my mother, what happened? And she said, with a lot of alarm in her voice, that I fell down, there are stitches, etc. And my father immediately came to me, and you know how we check temperature? He put his hands on my forehead. I had no temperature, that's not my problem. But he put that and said, you know what happened? And she started telling about his trip to my mother. And that was the ultimate letdown. So he never took any responsibility. My mother, I had a wonderful relationship. She came from a very, very hard background. I mean, she lost her father when she was 15 with 2 younger siblings and widowed mother. So she went through a very hard life. And so she would always tell me those stories, and those stories form good part, I mean, like everyone else, and the stories we hear from our parents forms our fabric, the mental fabric. And
But she never ate a Rasgulla all her life, and I believe...
Yeah, so when her father was a freedom movement activist for Congress, and he was in jail. And there he contracted some kind of a disease. We believe it was tuberculosis, but no one knows. And the British policy was never to let any prisoner die in the jail, because that creates political issues. So they let him go, and he came home. There was no money to do any treatment. And he lived for another 15, 20 days before he died. And just before dying, he once asked for a Rasgulla. And they couldn't afford that. He couldn't buy. So my mother never ate any Rasgulla, and I don't have that shared experience, but I also couldn't enjoy that taste. It was very hard life. But somebody this morning was asking me that in your book, I don't see any bitterness. And I told her that that's probably because we all felt extremely privileged. Even my parents, they felt where they came from, they have gone a long way. I have always felt good about my position. And plus, everyone we knew at that time were in the same boat. We didn't knew people who were better off than us. So that was the reality.
But then some of your friends, father's friends, left because they became successful and they moved to Bombay. And did that bring about some kind of...
The group of friends that grew up together when they were all planning to make films.
And change the world.
And change the world with no knowledge of how to make a film. So this was my father, Rishikesh Mukherjee, Ritik Katok, Sholil Chaudhary, Kunal Sen. So this was their very tight group of friends. Everyone had a film treatment in their pocket that they'll pounce on the first person who is willing to finance them. Out of that, Rishikesh Mukherjee was the first to get a break in Bombay, so he moved to Bombay. He started making slightly different films. Sholil Kaka, he went to Bombay, he became very well known. So I could see there was a stark, they used to come, they used to visit. My father, whenever he went to Bombay, he would stay with Rishi Kaka. But there was a gap, there was a huge gap between them.
There was a distance growing intellectually.
One day I remember when Rishikesh Mukherjee was already stopped making films. He had a flat in Bandra overlooking the sea, and my father went to see him. They were sitting in the balcony, and the sun was setting, and Rishi Kaka told my father that, look, one more day gone. And my father said, if you say such things again, I'll walk out.
But there was also, I think, when we had people here, we read your book, that importance of adda, that importance of getting together and discussing, talking, so much so that your mother one day was cooking rice, and there wasn't any rice at home, so she was boiling the water and waiting for your father to bring the rice back so that she could cook some lunch. And your father disappeared for a very long time, not to get rice, but he was in the park,
yes,
involved in this adda.
I was trying, but one of his friends who were in the park came at our place and said, where is Mrinal? And my mother said, he's trying to get some money to buy some rice. And my mother was already kept the chulla on so that the rice will come and they can drop it. And this friend said, What? He's shopping. He was with us in the park. So, yeah.
For the importance of Adda. Kunal, you joined Patho Bhavan as one of the earliest students because your parents were ideologically aligned to the founders of the new school. But your father's statements regarding political issues had him lock horns with the principal, Umar Shehanovish, whom you respected very deeply. We all did. Tell us a bit about your school years and friends. Abhijit Gupta and Nitish Roy even worked with him. I'm also keen to ask this question because in the audience today are many of our friends from Patho Bhavan. It's a very special moment for both of us.
Yeah. Yes, we went to the same school, so did my wife Nisha. We knew her as Urmimala then. Urmimala was 3 years younger to us, and I was dreadfully afraid of her and Nisha's sister, who were classmates, because they had this. They were extremely confident, very good-looking, charming young women, and they had the habit of giggling. And all males have this property. You start imagining there is a combination of self-underconfidence, at the same time self-centric belief that if they are giggling, they must be giggling at us. And so I used to cross street whenever I saw them, both of them. So Patho Bhavan was a very strange school. When I joined, it was 1965, middle of the year. A bunch of revolutionary teachers from South Point, they decided to break out and start their own school. And I still remember the very first day of the school, we were 18 students, and there were probably as many teachers. None of them were paid. And since then, in my school days, I mean, I don't know how many people can claim that. Since I was a little grown up, class 9, class 10, not a single week would go by when a teacher wouldn't come to our house to talk, and not to my parents. They came to our house to talk to me as a friend, and if they were not coming, we would go to some teacher's house. So that was a remarkable experience. And also, yes, I had quite a few artist friends, like you mentioned. There's one incident. Can I?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So, my father always used Bangsi Chandragupta as an art director, who was also a close friend of Ray and his art director. So when Bangsi Chandragupta died, he was there was a crisis. He tried to use the typical industry designers, and they're not imaginative, very conservative, very conventional. So one time he was about to make this film called Courage, and he said, Kunal, can one of your friends do it? Because he knew I had a whole bunch of artist friends. And this is a risky thing, because if I say yes and recommend somebody and they screw up, then the blame will be on me. So I said, I'm not in there. You know my friends. You think of somebody. He said, who can do construction work? I said, Nitish, one of my friends, does it. So he said, what's his phone number? So he called Nitish one morning and gave an outline of the story, that it's about a young couple with a son, and in the beginning of the film, their servant boy dies. And it's the 2 days after that. The events take place 2 or 3 days after that. So we said, Nitish, why don't you come and see? So Nitish came a little later. He's not particularly an articulate person. And the first thing he asked is this a love marriage or an arranged marriage? And my father was really annoyed. He said, what does it have to do? They already have a kid. The marriage happened, it's not in the film. And he said, no, but if it is an arranged marriage, the furniture will be matched, because you get it in a dowry. If it's a love marriage, the furnitures would not match so well. I mean, which was an incredibly insightful thing. So anyway, so Nitish did the set, he did a brilliant job, but this is also a story about how sometimes other circumstances help one's career. So when the film was being shot in Kolkata, the Calcutta Film Festival was taking place. So there were plenty of people from both Indian film industry as well as outsiders. They came to the city, and when they heard that my father is shooting, many of them thought they'll go and see it. And everyone liked the set. And immediately after that, Shyam Benegal went back to Bombay and wrote to my father saying, Mrinal, can I use your set designer? And Nitish eventually got 3 or 4 national awards. He became, but this connection, if this was not there, the timing was not there, who knows? I mean, he may not have got that break.
Kunal, Bondhu, your book on your father is due to be released later this week, celebrating his centennial year. What was the process like to chronicle your father's life, to recollect memories from your early childhood? Was it difficult?
Not really. I mean, I'm not a writer. I enjoy writing short things, but not a writer. When the publisher asked me to do so, I hesitated. And the first thing I decided is I'm not going to write about the aesthetics of his films. Because when a close relative says good things about a film, it has no credibility. I'll have no credibility if I say this was such a great film. So I decided I'll stay away from that and then stay with personal anecdotes. I also made an early decision that I will not make it into a biography, chronological biography, because there are other people who wrote it and did a much better job. I'm not a researcher either. So I decided to take sort of thematic chapters and connect different parts of his life, mostly anecdotes. And my father was a very, very, he was fond of anecdotes. All his conversations were anecdotes. So I tried to string them together. One problem I faced is when you do that, you often tend to repeat certain things because on different chapters, the same event would come back. So there had to be a lot of pruning, and maybe I couldn't prune all of them. You found one.
It's a very, very beautifully written book. I mean,
thank you.
And an honest book. That's a word that comes to me again and again. Kunal, people generally have the impression that Mrinal Sen is very stern and, he was sometimes abrasive and people were slightly scared. But there is this other side. There is a side which is gentle, which is verging on the romantic. I especially remember this bit you have written where your mother threaded a needle and kept it in his suitcase that lest he lose a button on his kurta,
Yeah, so he was in some film festival and he had to go from one city to a nearby city, and there was a young woman who was doing the driving. So he was driving with this woman for a fairly long drive, and he reached the destination. He went to his hotel room to change, and he said that he told me that there was a little bit of excitement because he was supposed to meet this woman again for dinner. So there was that a tinge of romantic excitement, and he was trying to change, and he pulled out the usual white kurta, and there was a critical button missing. So he was searching for another kurta that has the button, and he suddenly discovered there in a little plastic bag was a needle and a thread for such situation. He said, whatever romantic things I had to go away because, he had a very soft side. I think his persona while shooting was very different. He would often be angry, tense, and that is primarily because he used to improvise a lot during shooting. And when you improvise, that becomes a very tense moment. It's not a mechanical process of translating your script into a film. which also has its tension, but less so. But he was actually creating. So that was a very tense moment, and he would react very poorly. There was one day, only once in his lifetime, I have seen him not do that. So that time, me and Nisha, we were dating. We were not yet married. And in Ek Din Pratidin, there was a short role for a nurse. And he asked Nisha, can you do it? And Nisha said, sure. So we were tense because I knew Nisha is not an actor. She will make mistakes. He will get angry. So for the first time, my mother went to a shooting just to keep a tab on things and control. I was there, I was tense, my mother was tense, Nisha was completely oblivious of this whole thing. And the scene was she has to walk up a corridor in a hospital. There is a line drawn on the ground. She has to stop exactly there because that's where the focus is, and look up and say, who is from patient so-and-so? The patient has died. So Nisha walked up, looked at the line, stood, I said, cut, cut, cut. So she was asked to, I thought, okay, now it will explode. And so she said, you can't look down. She said, if I can't look down, how do I know where the line is? So they put a row of slippers, chappals, and tilted the camera a little bit up so that you can't see it. She walked up, kicked the chappals all over the place, and then stood a step ahead. So then finally, they tilted the camera further up. One assistant was lying down to tackle her in spot. All through this, my father remained extremely sweet and nice. The next shot was this old man who was supposed to be doing a small bit. He made one mistake, and this guy got all the pent up.
Kunal, we are almost at the end of our conversation. I mean, just for this evening.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask you was, I was there when he passed, and we had that memorial meeting. And what I sensed was that the technicians, when they came and spoke about him, that he meant a great deal to all these people who came from far-off villages to be with you for that occasion. What was his relationship with people like Shotojit Rai, Ritik Ghatok, with people, his colleagues, but also technicians, also musicians, because I know that he had a bit of a problem with the great Ravi Shankar. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. He always had a very close bonding with all the technicians, no matter which rank they were in. And even though his films were one of the lowest budget films for that political reason, but he paid significantly higher than the industry rate to all the technicians, and they understood that, they appreciated that. And sometimes those relationships went far beyond being just a technician. They were very close. They became close friends, like K.K. Mahajan, his cameraman. He had a very tight relationship with him. With music, my father never had a good, well-developed sense of music. So he was not trained in music, so it was very difficult for him to explain to the music director what exactly he wants. It was always a kind of strange, hilarious conversation when he's trying to convey the sense. And he didn't like too much music in films. What he said, and I don't know whether that was the real reason or it was his inadequacy that he mouthed like that. He also felt, just like in Nostalgia, he didn't want to soak the audience's mind into a lull with the right music where you are no longer thinking very.
You're prepared for the scene,
yes.
in a sense.
The one thing that he always, so he used very little music, and he avoided well-known musicians, because everyone faces that throughout the world, that if you have a very well-known musician, they start believing that the film is because of their music. That's so. When he agreed to use Ravi Shankar for the music of Genesis, which again I think it was probably not his idea, but it was a European production, and they must have insisted that this is a great name to have. And the music was recorded in Paris, where while recording, he could tell that he won't be able to use most of the music. But Ravi Shankar came with music composed for the entire film, the entire soundtrack. So while editing the film, he threw away most of it and kept, because another thing happened whenever shooting here in Bengal, they always dubbed. They recorded the sound, but that sound was never kept because it's too much noise, and the voices are dubbed. The natural soundtracks are recreated. They're shooting in a desert, and it was a international crew. They have never heard of not recording the real sound, so they recorded the real sound, and they were exquisite. So my father loved the quality of the natural sound. So he filled the entire soundtrack with that, and there were scattered little pieces of music. And then the film was released in Paris, and Ravi Shankar went there with his friend Andre Pabin and other very, very well-known musicians. And next day he called my father. He said, Mrinal Babu, I felt like you took out your sandals and slapped me on the face, because I couldn't show my face to my friends. So I don't think they ever spoke since then. But recently we met his wife Sukanya, and she mentioned this film. She has a memory of it. She never mentioned this dissatisfaction.
And Kunal, when you had actors at home, how was it? I was especially, of course, referring to Mithun Chakraborty and his early days.
Mithun at that time, he never acted in films. He just came out of film school. He had long hair. He would wear trousers that flared up into long bell bottom. He would wear completely tight-fitting shirts. The buttons will be open up to here so that you can see his physique. And it was a complete mismatch in our very, very lower middle class household. But he always came. He didn't change until the shooting. A few days before the shooting, my father got a local street barber. And he came and gave him a really brutal and horrible, I mean, Mithun was almost at the verge of crying, seeing himself, but he did a great job after that.
Thank you so very much, Kunal. Do we have any questions?
Thank you for this very interesting conversation. It was especially delightful because it was anecdotal. And I'm just curious. There's not any serious question. So since the medium of language in his films has been primarily Bangla, he has also done Hindi films. And Telugu. So I'm just thinking, was it more difficult to do films in other languages because of the language?
Yes, I don't think he ever made a film in another language out of choice. It was either the financier said that I'll finance a film, I will not interfere as long as you make it in Telugu or Oriya. Bhuvan Shom was a slight departure where he decided to make that film in Hindi because he was experimenting a lot with that film. And one thing he tried to see is, can he collect a larger audience by being national? With Kandahar, another Hindi film he made, and Ek Din Achanak. These are both, if you look at them, they are all very, very Bengali in their milieu and atmosphere and the story. But there his choice was, these were difficult subjects where he needed to trust the actors. And he wanted to find actors who can who can play those characters, and they picked. So he chose Shabana, people like that, and so he had a lot of problem with language translation. He didn't speak Hindi at all. I mean, he barely understood it, and of course nothing of Telugu. I remember one incident where he wrote the script of this Telugu film, Okaudi Katha, in Bengali, and then he got a Telugu guy who lived in Kolkata for a long time. He knew Bengali to do the translation. So he translated, but he didn't trust anybody when it comes to his work. So he went to Hyderabad before the shooting and called upon a couple of literary people out there and asked them to check the translation. And they made a lot of changes, saying this guy lived in Kolkata for too long and forgot his Telugu. Then he went to the village in Telangana where he would shoot, and again he showed the translation to the local villages. They made a lot of changes, but there was one phrase that survived all this previous translation. He had a line describing a character as very lazy, and they said he sleeps like they're lazy like a water buffalo. So that got translated, that got translated all through, except the villagers said, what does it mean? He said, well, it's like comparing a person to a water buffalo who are lazy. He said, water buffaloes are very hardworking animals. This is entirely an urban thing. In that same film, there was a sequence where this woman gets ultimately frustrated and rebels and shouts back to her father-in-law, and she says, no, no, no. And there has to be a lot of punch in it. And na in almost any language, it's nahi, niyat, no. In Telugu, it's ledu. And he said, no, ledu doesn't work. I mean, give me something else. And the translator said, that's the only word, that's no. So he had to ultimately accept that ledu, but...
Thank you so much.
Were there any Indian filmmakers that you admired?
Yeah, quite a few. He was a great admirer of Ray, especially his earlier films. He had some reservation about his later films. And in fact, just before coming here, I was in Chicago and I was talking to somebody who was a student at the University of Chicago before I went there, long before, and when my father visited the university. And he said something which is interesting. He said he came with a package of 5 films, and he went from university to university showing them, talking about it. And none of them were his films. He carried 5 films from other filmmakers. So he had tremendous respect for Adur Gopalakrishnan. He loved many of Shyam Benegal's films. So yeah, he was more fond of that genre of film that was made in the 70s, 80s, that new movement, new film movement. Later on, he felt that some of the Indian films are becoming a little too safe. They're nice films, they're well-made films, but they're made for a larger audience, which he never appreciated.
Kunal, in 1978, I think Parashuram was released. And in 78, if you remember, there was a huge flood in the city. And Parashuram was shot entirely outdoor, I think. And that time it was like we could relate that story, and the flood took place, I think, 1 or 2 months back. So, any memories of that film being shot? When
So
it was-
I remember it was shot along the bridge.
railway bridge.
Yes, and they built. There was already homeless people out there, and they built a little bit around there. They shot in near Monopukur Road. There was a old cemetery, and they shot there where some of the characters, homeless people, were living. And in 2 years' time, we came back and saw that cemetery is no longer a cemetery. It has become a homeless people's place. I mean, so he probably triggered that. Though later on, I have never seen him mention that film. This is something that I noticed. He would be incredibly protective of his films when it is just made. Anybody criticizing, especially when he considered the criticism to be not so bright, he would be very, very abusive. But that lasted for a few months, and then for some films he retained a love and affection. For most others, he would say, I wish I could make it again. So he did not hold a very deep association with the film, and Parashuram was probably one of them. That he liked portions of it, but later on he wasn't all that happy with the film.
Arun Mukherjee did a splendid job.
Yes.
Yeah, so before I ask my question, I'd like to share a very small interaction with him. This is about 35 years ago when Taj Bengal had just opened. My father is from the film industry in Bombay. He was into production and North Indian films, and we were to have lunch with your father. I was totally disinterested in the meeting. I was more interested to speak to my parents because they lived in Delhi. And we all had a little lunch, and the conversation was quite boring for me, and I just didn't know how it was going. But both of them were very involved, and he was talking about Bengali cinema, and my father was trying to tell him that let's make something which sells also, and then he had his own opinions. And however, the lunch got over, and we were waiting for our car outside, and there was a moment of 1 or 2 minutes where I was left alone with him, and my father had to talk to somebody, and I really didn't know what to talk to him, and I was very intrigued, and I just asked him, can you please tell me what you like about yourself? Yes, and he smiled, and he just mellowed, and he became so soft. And first he said, nobody's asked me this question. I'm so happy you've asked me this. And then my father came. So I never got an answer. So I'd like to ask you today that if you could share something what you know as his son that he really liked about himself.
His most favorite thing was to be slightly self-ridiculous. So he would always tell anecdotes of things that he had done which he is not proud of, and they're funny,
But was that a defense, or what was that he really liked about himself? Because my question was like, I loved looking at his eyes, I loved what he was talking, and I also was interested in what my father was talking, but it made no sense to me. And then when I got this moment, and I thought, if I ask him this, my father's not going to scold me, so let me ask him this. And I asked him, and he was so happy I asked him that. But I never got an answer from him that day.
I think that's the quality he often enjoyed. Yeah.
I think he liked putting people's leg.
Thank you.
Oh yes, I mean
Yes.
he was incredibly he really loved embarrassing people. So I remember one incident. We were married then, and Nisha came back from the lab where she worked, and there he heard a rumor that they're doing matchmaking for Ray's son, Shondip. Shondip was also, we were in school together. So she mentioned that, and immediately she said, don't tell anyone because this is just a rumor, it has no basis. And my father nodded. After about 10 minutes, I saw him dialing a number, and he intentionally came to our table where we were sitting, and he said, Manik Babu, Nisha bolchilo, Babur naki biyer babostha hocche, and he was looking straight at her. So,
You have a question?
Yes. I've always been intrigued by Mrinal Sen's unique casting eye, because he chose actors very specifically curated to the part, and so many actors, the actors he selected, have had a very long career. Some spoke about Mithun Chakraborty, there's Mohammed Srila. I've always been very intrigued by Rajan Tarovdar. And that Madhavi, of course, yes. So many of them, Shabana, Smita, when he had to turn to veterans. So could you tell us something about how he casted for his films?
So, in his early career, he went for very conventional actors. Savitri Chatterjee and Soumitra was already established then. Then there was a phase when he only wanted newcomers, new faces, with no training in acting. And I think there was a little bit of a risk in that. He would often pick an actor who really doesn't have any skill, but he didn't even determine that. He just went with the face and the gestures. Some of them managed to be okay, but it's a risky proposition. But in film, you can often hide somebody's acting weakness. I remember when he was shooting Interview and Ranjit Malik was chosen, he was petrified. He was not an actor. The very first shot, I remember it was shot in our apartment. He was supposed to come upstairs and press a bell, wait for a while, and then press again because no one is answering. And Ranjit was so nervous, he pressed, and immediately, within a second, he pressed again and again. And the more my father got angry, the more mistakes. I mean, he lost his entire sense of timing. But when you look at that film, you don't see that. You don't see a novice actor stumbling. So you can hide a lot of... yes, he got an international award because he comes across as his weakness as an actor came across as a very natural... Yeah. I have to, sorry, since we talked about Shondip's marriage and wedding, so about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was seeing a very vivid dream. And in that dream, I was talking to a friend of mine, very close friend of mine, sitting on a bed. And we are talking about something very serious, but I'm constantly getting distracted because I could hear this is my young self, and I'm getting distracted by hearing my parents' voice from the other room that they are arranging my marriage. And it is making me incredibly angry that how dare they can discuss this without even talking to me. And I couldn't even hear my friend anymore because my mind was constantly over there, boiling with anger. I had no problem with the selection they made, but just the fact that they are doing this discussion. The choice they made was Shondip. So I felt so proud of my modernity that the fact that I'm getting married to a man didn't bother me. It was.
You have that anecdote about the nicknames.
Oh yes.
This is
So these three people are often bracketed together: Ghatak, Ray, and my father. All of them have a single son, and they're all called Babu. Babu is the least imaginative nickname you can think of. I mean, so it shows how much of their creative energy they were willing to spend on naming their sons.
Celebrating Mrinal Sen this evening was indeed a treat for the cultural enthusiasts of Kolkata. Nothing could be more enlightening than having with us Kunal Sen and Ina Puri talk about a legendary filmmaker who is a treasure of Indian cinema. Thank you so much for allowing us to cherish such wonderful memories. On behalf of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, I extend my sincerest gratitude to Kunal Sen and Ina Puri. I take this opportunity to thank our patron Shree Cements Limited, digital media partners The Telegraph Online and My Kolkata, and AnandoBajar.com. Special thank you, of course, to Ina, my fellow ASAS woman from Gurugram. Thank you to the team of Bengal Club for organizing today's Tête-à-tea, and to you, our lovely audience of Kolkata, who made this session so successful. Thank you for your gracious presence. May I now request Sudipta Chakraborty to please felicitate Kunal Sen.